Here I will discuss the adverse effects on respiratory depression. The most dangerous adverse effects of fentanyl is respiratory depression, that is decreased sensitivity to carbon dioxide, leading to reduced rate of breathing, which can cause anoxic brain injury or death. This risk is decreased when the airway is secured with an endotracheal tube. This risk is higher in specific groups like those with obstructive sleep apnea. Other factors can increase the risk of respiratory depression are high fentanyl doses, sleep, older age, simultaneous use of central nervous system depressants, respiratory acidosis, decreased fentanyl clearance from the body, allied anesthetics, hyperventilation. Muscle rigidity. If high boluses of fentanyl are administered quickly, muscle rigidity of the vocal cords can make bag mask ventilations very difficult. The exact mechanism of this effect is unknown, but it can be prevented and treated using neuromuscular blockers. How does fentanyl affect the brain? Like heroin, morphine, and other opioid drugs, fentanyl works by binding to the body's opioid receptors, which are found in areas of the brain that controls the brain and emotions. Fentanyl's effects include extreme happiness, drowsiness, confusion, constipation, sedation, problems breathing, unconsciousness. How can a fentanyl overdose be treated? Many drug dealers mix the cheaper fentanyl with other drugs like heroin, cocaine, MDMA, methamphetamine to increase their profits, making it out difficult to know which drugs is causing the overdose. Naloxone is a medicine that can create the fentanyl overdose when given right away. It works by rapidly binding to opioid receptors and blocking the effects of opioid drugs. But fentanyl is stronger than the opioid drugs like morphine and might require multiple doses naloxone. Because of this, if you suspect someone has overdosed, the most important step to take it to call 911 so that can receive immediate and medical attention. Once medical personnel arrives, they will administer naloxone if they suspect an opioid drug is involved. Regulations and controls of fentanyl analogs. Regulations of control on the production of fentanyl. The regulatory control on the production of fentanyl analogs typically involves the combinations of legislative measures, regulatory frameworks, and law enforcement efforts. Here are some common approaches. Controlled substance designation. Fentanyl analogs are often classified as controlled substances and scheduled drugs. So, of subjects to specific regulations and restrictions. Governments establish lists or schedules that classify these substances based on the potential for abuse, medical use, and safety to profile. Analog Act. Some countries, such as the United States, have enacted laws like the Analog Act to control fentanyl analogs. These laws enable authorities to regulate substances that are structurally or pharmacologically similar to controlled substances, even if they were not specifically listed at the time of enhancement. Precursor chemical control. Governments impose strict regulations on the precursor chemical used in the production of fentanyl analogs. By monitoring and controlling the availability of these chemicals, authorities aim to disrupt the illicit manufacturing of these substances. Manufacturing quotas. Regulatory bodies may establish production quotas to limit the volume of fentanyl analogs that can be manufactured in a given period. This helps prevent excessive productions and potential diversions of illicit purposes. Regulatory control to the distributions of fentanyl analogs. The regulatory control on the distribution of fentanyl and its uses involves a range of measures aimed at preventing misuse, ensuring proper handling, and reducing the associated risks. Here are some key aspects of regulatory control. Prescription requirements. Fentanyl is a potent opioid medication used to severe pain management, typically under strict medical supervision. Regulatory authorities enforce prescription requirements, limiting its distributions to authorized healthcare professionals and patients with valid prescriptions. Dispensing regulations. Pharmacists and healthcare providers are bound by regulations that governs the dispensing of fentanyl and monitor its distribution. These regulations may include restrictions or on quantitative dispensed, documentations of prescriptions, and periodic reporting to the regulating agencies. Controlled substance monitoring programs. Many countries have established monitoring programs to track the distributions of controlled substances, including fentanyl. These programs aim to identify patterns of inappropriate prescribing, diversion, or misuse, allowing authorities to intervene and take appropriate actions. Supply chain control. Governments regulate the distributions of fentanyl within the pharmaceutical supply chain. This includes listening and oversight of manufacturers, distributors, wholesalers, and pharmacies to ensure compliance with regulations, proper storage, and appropriate record keeping. Import and export controls. Fentanyl is subject to strict import and export controls requiring proper documentations and permits of international trade. These controls have prevent the illicit diversions of fentanyl and its distributions across borders. Latest research on fentanyl analogs, structure modifications, and novel analogs. Research have been studying at the structure activity relationships of fentanyl analogs to better understand their pharmacological properties and potential risks. This includes exploring novel analogs with varying potency and receptor selectivity. Emerging analogs. Studies have been conducting to identify the characterized new fentanyl analogs as they appear the illicit drugs market. Analytical techniques and forensic methods have been developed to detect and identify these emerging analogs accurately. Pharmacology and toxicity. Research has focused on elucidating the pharmacological properties of fentanyl analogs, including their binding affinity to opioid receptor and their potential for respiratory depression, overdose, and dependence. This knowledge is crucial for understanding their risk and developing appropriate treatment of strategies. Detection and testing methods. Researchers have been working on improving the sensitivity and specificity of detection methods for fentanyl analogs. This includes developing advanced analytical techniques such as mass spectrometry and immunoassays to detect these substances in various matrices, including biological samples. Harm reduction strategies. Studies have examined harm reduction interventions to address the risk associated with fentanyl analogs. These strategies may include the distributions of naloxone and opioid overdose, reversing medications to prevent fatal overdoses. Here I will discuss to reduce the risk of misuse and abuse. Reducing the risk of misuse and abuse of fentanyl involves a multifaceted approach that includes various strategies. Here are some key measures aimed at mitigating the risk associated with fentanyl. Education and awareness. Public education campaigns play a vital role in informing individuals about the risk associated with fentanyl use, including its high potency, the potential for overdose. These campaigns can target healthcare professionals, patients, and the general publics to promote safe use practices and increase awareness of the dangers of misuse. Prescribing guidelines. Healthcare providers follow specific prescribing guidelines for fentanyl to ensure its appropriate use. These guidelines may include restrictions on dosages, durations of use, and patient monitoring to minimize the risk of misuse and dependence. And the last content is conclusion. The decrease in the availability of fentanyl analogs in the illicit drug market suggests that the fentanyl core structure scheduling has been an effective strategy. Lapse of such scheduling may reverse the gains, and permanent scheduling legislation should continue to facilitate these positive effects. Such a strategy of class-wide scheduling should be considered for other substances. Class scheduling allows for these substances to be interdicted at our borders and sized outside the closed systems of manufacture, distribution, and research as established by the CSA. In fact, in the CSA and the Federal Analogs Act should be revisited generally and perhaps updated to current needs. Further, Congress may consider specific measures to facilitate and support research of FRS and NPS. More broadly, more research is needed to create a body of publicly available scientific literature to produce a coder of experts on the pharmacodynamics and cognitive and physical effects of these novel psychoactive substances. Regardless, if nothing else, a proactive approach of FRS scheduling rather than the previous retroactive drugs by drug scheduling is needed. Thank you so much for watching my video.